The Wah Mee Club was situated in a ground-floor space of an apartment building built in 1909. Starting during the 1920s, it was one of a few clubs that worked in and around Chinatown, offering music, dancing, alcohol, and betting.
The Cult of Gozer.
For a long time, a red, neon Wah Mee Club sign held tight the structure's side, alluring guests to enter the club mostly down Maynard Alley South. For the vast majority of its reality, the Wah Mee Club was a center for speculators anxious to bet up to $1,000 per hand and take a shot at pai gow, poker, and mahjong. Seattle's long-standing betting resilience strategy assisted with keeping clubs, for example, the Wah Mee open for quite a long time. A great deal of beat cops invested a ton of energy at the Wah Mee and other Chinatown betting clubs and speakeasies. Nobody posed inquiries. The cops got their payoffs in return for allowing the clubs to work in Chinatown. By the mid-1980s, the Wah Mee had acquired a standing as perhaps Seattle's best club for high-stakes betting. Its pots regularly came to $100,000, and there could be up to $50,000 bet on the table at some random time. The house gathered 5%. Whole pay checks could be set down in a solitary evening. Security at the Wah Mee was tight. 4 lines of glass blocks fronted the passageway. Every glass block was hazy with the exception of one, which filled in as a peephole for a club watchman to distinguish visitors and choose whether or not to permit guests past 2 arrangements of steel entryways to the gaming and bar rooms. The club's office was furnished with a buzzer and a panic alarm that would set off an alert. By 1983, the Wah Mee worked Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights and remained open until 6 a.m. Its supporters were limited to semi-wealthy, Chinese-American restaurateurs and other entrepreneurs who were on first-name and comfortable terms with the club's directors. In spite of the fact that its celebrated history in the area presented it some degree of esteem, locals told journalists that the Wah Mee Club around 1983 resembled a dive bar, agreeable yet not fancy. The 3 accomplices. 3 men were responsible for the 1983 thefts at the Wah Mee Club. 2 of them participated in the killings. Quan Fa Willie, Mac, 23, had moved with his family from central China's Kwangtung province in 1975. He momentarily went to Cleveland High School in Seattle prior to exiting and procuring his general equivalency degree. At the hour of the homicides at the Wah Mee Club, Mac was living with his folks and kin in their South Seattle home. He had worked an assortment of random temp jobs, table attendant, cook, and server in Chinese cafes, worker at a steelyard, dealer at 2 or 3 Chinatown's nighttime betting clubs, and had acquired a genuine betting addiction by 1983. Benjamin Ng, 20, was a secondary school dropout who, similar to Mac, worked in Chinatown eateries and betting clubs. Ng, who was frequently spotted cruising Chinatown roads in his blue Corvette, had piled up a few criminal allegations, including theft, shoplifting, and 2 incidents including handguns. Wai Chiu, Tony, Ng, no connection to Benjamin, 25, lived with his folks in South Seattle. He had shown up in Seattle from Hong Kong with his family in the mid-1970s, moved on from Cleveland High School, and tried out a professional technician's program at South Seattle Community College. He worked maintenance at his dad's eatery in Linwood, and at a vehicle sales center in Midtown Seattle. By most records, he was quiet, had a sweetheart and avoided problems. As he would later clarify during his preliminary, Tony Ng consented to join Mac and Benjamin Ng in burglarizing the Wah Mee Club since he owed Mac $1,000. Taking part in the arrangement would clear his obligation, Ng said. He professed to be unaware that murder was important for the arrangement. The robberies and murders. On the evening of February 18, 1983, Mac met Tony Ng outside the passage to the Wah Mee Club. The pair weren't aliens to the club, and a safety officer hummed them inside. The 2 dallied around the club for a half hour or so. There were 7 or 8 individuals in the club, the majority of whom were finding a seat at one of the betting tables. One man was mixing drinks. And in the background you could hear the mahjong tiles clicking like tap shoes. Tony Ng, apprehensive and restless, sat at the bar and requested tea. He served by Wai Yak Chin, a Navy veteran who lived with his better half, Rose, in a close-by condo, and frequently functioned as a dealer at one of the nearby clubs, situated close to him. Chin, 61, was a short, delicate, Chinese man with salt and pepper hair and a slight girth. Chin had shown up not long before 12 p.m., on schedule to have a delayed supper before he went to fill in as a Pai Gao dealer. The men gestured at each other. Chin offered Ng a nibble of his food, Chinese-style spare ribs and little potatoes ordered from a close-by cafe, as he sat and they talked. About 12:30 a.m., Benjamin Ng went across South King Street and entered Maynard Alley. Although the paper sack he produced was overstuffed, with pre-cut nylon strings. The security guard still allowed him inside the club, thinking the bag was most likely full of cash. "Hands up!" Benjamin Ng yelled. The vast majority were assembled around two gaming tables, their backs toward the door. They pivoted to see the disturbance and hold up their hands. One of the shooters burst into the office and pointed a weapon at the safety officer so he could keep on buzzing arriving visitors inside. Tony Ng went to the back of the club and checked a back space for any clients who had strayed to the bathroom before the looters showed up. Every other person was requested to the floor at gunpoint. They moved to the focal point of the gaming room, around two wide and weighty oak tables, one finished off with blue felt, one more with green felt. Ashtrays lay on the tabletops, and modest wooden stools encompassed them. Although glaring lights were mounted to the roofs, they were wound down. Instead, fancy lamps cast the room in a yellow-orange hue. The paper sack was opened, nylon strings were removed. Individually, the casualties' hands and feet were bound. As more visitors entered the club, they discovered their companions and individual players lying on the floor. They, as well, were bound and taken to the floor with the others. Cooks and servers were finishing their days of work and resigning to the Wah Mee Club for beverages and bedding. In under 10 minutes, the quantity of individuals in the club had almost doubled. Benjamin Ng and Tony Ng started rifling the casualties' pockets. Wallets, a cash register, and one lady's handbag were unloaded and stolen. A few wallets were thrown in a sack, others were emptied and dropped on the floor. Happy with their take, Tony Ng later affirmed in his testimony that Mac advised him to stand by two security entryways. He adhered to Mac's guidelines, carrying a pack loaded down with guns and a large amount of money. Then Mac and Benjamin Ng ruthlessly shot the casualties that were spread out on the floor. The safety officer was cornered in the office and was shot mercilessly to death. The pair then, at that point, ventured down to the principal floor and moved around the room, discharging shots and venturing over blood that was starting to leak from their casualties. In excess of 30 shots were discharged at 14 casualties, as per the Seattle Police Department criminal investigators. Not a single shot missed. As indicated by police, the executioners stopped a few times to reload, and Mac and Benjamin Ng ceased shooting when they ran out of bullets. 4 additional unidentified Chinese men, ranging in age from 30s to 70s. They escaped with about $20,000 and a sum of 10 guns. Police recuperated more than $10,000 in cash from Benjamin Ng's room, and more than $5,000 in Willie's room. The only one left. Even after the Wah Mee Club's weighty security entryways pummeled shut, and Benjamin Ng, Willie Mac, and Tony Ng escaped down Maynard Alley, guests continued showing up at the club. One individual, a cook from Federal Way, rang the doorbell and trusted that a safety officer would look through the glass block, gesture his head in acknowledgement, and open the entryways. Yet, this time nothing occurred. He rang the doorbell once more. He beat on the club's front entryway. Still no answer. Another man, a cook at an eatery around the bend, showed up. They took a stab at pulling open the club's entryways and looking in through the glass block window. They were confounded. Inside the club and among the bodies lying on the floor, one individual was moving. Wah Yak Chin. As he later affirmed, the more clamor individuals made by beating on the entryway, the more Chin came to, and the more his memory of the evening gradually hit him. He recalled Tony Ng, the youngster who sat with him at the bar, the young fellow with whom he had just shared his dinner. At this point is when Chin was shoved to the floor. It was Tony Ng who tied up the elderly man. Lying face down on the floor, Chin contorted his head and looked up at Ng and said, "No good reason to tie it so tight." Chin told his attacker, as per his testimony, "I'm an old man." Because Tony Ng loosened his casualty's restraints, Chin could now free himself. One more bit of good fortune, Chin presumed he would be shot. When the two men started shooting, he wriggled underneath one of the gaming tables. The move kept Mac and Benjamin Ng from shooting right at Chin. This did not stop Chin from taking a severe wound to the neck. Gradually, Chin slithered away from the bodies and blood that covered the lower floor and pushed toward the exit. He inclined himself toward one of the security entryways and, causing him a deep sense of shock, the weighty entryways fell open. He pushed past them and stumbled outside the club, the entryways locking behind him. However, piles of trash on Maynard Alley was Chin's sanctuary for the occasion. As he tumbled to the ground, in shock, the two men who had been beating on the entryway moments before stepped back. The men, thusly, glanced with sickening dread at Chin, as they seen bullets had torn through his neck and jaw, and left through his throat. "Who did it?" one of the men inquired. "Ng and Mac," Chin mumbled. "That is everything I can tell. The entryway is locked as of now. Please call 911. In the meantime, a Seattle cop was on his beat in Chinatown, when the police radio in his vehicle declared somebody had called 911 to report a man with gunshot wounds was found in Maynard Alley South. The cop responded to the call and headed toward the Wah Mee Club, where he discovered two different cops were on the scene. The cops had seen a man assisting Chin with getting away from the club, up the rear entryway, and onto South King Street. So they called an ambulance for Chin, who was situated in the front seat of a watch vehicle and holding a blood-soaked rag to his face, attempting to respond to questions while dealing with extreme wounds. He could answer just yes or no, and surprisingly those answers were scarcely understandable in view of his wounds. Chin affirmed to police he had seen the suspects previously and he could recognize them. Minutes later, the rescue vehicle showed up. A cop rode with Chin to Harborview Medical Center, where Chin showed up in stable condition. He was put under substantial police watch and hurried to a surgery. The more he could recover, the more he could assist police in what occurred at the Wah Mee Club. The chase and end. Since why Chin lived, he could point out Willie, Mac and Benjamin Ng, who were captured not long after the crimes and accused of burglary and murder. In August 1983, Benjamin Ng was tried and condemned to life in prison without the chance of parole for killing 13 individuals at the Wah Mee Club. Mac's trial, which started on September 20, 1983, and closed on October 5, 1983, brought about capital punishment for Mac, who was seen as liable of 13 charges of aggravated first-degree murder and first-degree assault. While good lawyers saved Benjamin Ng a death sentence, Mac, the instigator in the perspective of the jury, and was condemned to death. After 8 years, a Washington State Supreme Court judge toppled that ruling, and Mac was resentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. Tony Ng stayed ran for a while. He was caught on October 4, 1984, when Royal Canadian Mounted Police, working couple with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, captured Ng in a condo in the Chinatown neighborhood of Calgary, Alberta. Ng had been working in a manufacturing plant and living under the false name Jim Wong. He was caught after FBI agents got a tip from an anonymous source that Ng was living in Calgary. The FBI reached the RCMP and requested that they follow up the lead. Tony Ng later testified he had shown up in Canada under about 14 days after the homicides. He conceded that he was at the Wah Mee Club the evening of the slaughter. He conceded he tied up a large number of the people in question and took their cash. However, he said Mac requested him to stand by in the space of the club between the two security entryways. Tony Ng said he heard shots and, later, he joined Mac and Benjamin Ng as they escaped the club. In return for joining the men, Ng said he got $6,000 and his $1,000 obligation with Mac was cleared. Tony Ng was sent back to Seattle. At his trial, Ng said he attempted to pull out of the Wah Mee Club theft, yet Mac took steps to kill him and his family in the event that he didn't take part. In April 1985, Tony Ng was guilty of burglary and assault, however not murder, and condemned to 30 years to life in jail. Notwithstanding being viewed as a model detainee, Ng, who didn't achieve U.S. citizenship when he showed up in America during the 1970s, was denied parole multiple times. He served 30 years before he was extradited to Hong Kong in 2014. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe.